Kalorama, a Recorded Books Highbridge imprint, presents Bridgebuilders: How Government Can Transcend Boundaries to Solve Big Problems, by William D. Eggers and Donald F. Kettl. Read by Paul Heitsch. Publisher's note: this audiobook has bonus material. Please contact whomever you purchased this audiobook from to request the material. All figures and tables referenced in this audiobook can be found in the bonus material. Introduction: A new approach to help government solve our biggest problems. The thesis of this book is simple. Governments, at all levels, can more effectively tackle society's toughest challenges by collaborating with bridge builders who bring together different parts of government and tap into other sectors of society. With every election, a new administration promises big policy ideas and a management revolution to implement them. Many voters, however, come away profoundly disappointed in the results. We think we know why. Historically, many of the management fixes have been based on what Kettl has termed a vending machine model of government. You have a problem, you build an organization to deal with it, you put money in the slot, and you expect it to yield results. This vending machine model used to work. Faced with a problem such as buildings are burning down, policymakers would create a fire department, staff it, equip it, and fund it. They could measure the department's value by the number of fires put out, lives saved, and property preserved. Citizens' trust in government grew every time they saw the fire department respond to calls. Governments were able to improve service. Horse-drawn tankers replaced bucket brigades. Motorized engines replaced horse-drawn tankers. Radios replaced yelling over the crackling of flames, and tall ladders raised from trucks replaced portable ladders that were too often too short. New technologies and better communication between departments increased effectiveness and responsiveness. Again, you perceive a problem, you build an organization to deal with it, you put money in the slot, and you wait for results. But the vending machine model is dated. It no longer reflects how governments tackle big problems today. Acting alone, agencies can't change quickly enough to match increasingly complex problems that cross boundaries and demand new approaches. Municipal firehouses still hold trucks loaded with ladders and hoses, but in 2020, fewer than 4% of all fire calls were for increasingly rare fires. The vast majority were for medical assistance. As with much local law enforcement, fire departments have become all-purpose aid organizations that must respond to shifting needs. What used to be a straightforward strategy, staff and fund an organization to fight fires, has become a far more complex, interdisciplinary, interconnected mission to deal with a vast, interconnected collection of problems, only some of which are fires. Indeed, most societal problems today extend far beyond the legislatively defined boundaries of the agencies or programs lawmakers initially mandated to deal with them. There's no low-hanging fruit or issues with obvious solutions. Consider homelessness. Is it an economic problem? A jobs problem? A mental health problem? A drug problem? A family problem? A criminal justice problem? Is it a problem for government, for nonprofit organizations, for individuals, for local governments, or for states, or the federal government? Do private companies help? The answer to each of these questions is yes. And that's why the vending machine model no longer works. Without a new model of government, we can spend a lot of money on problems, but the problems may not get solved. We're seeing homeless encampments spring up across America, despite the myriad efforts of nonprofit and elected leaders at the federal, state, and local levels to address housing instability. In the West, An outbreak of fires, with no regard for governmental boundaries, requires a concerted response from federal, state, and local teams. To further complicate matters, public expectations of government action have risen, even as cynicism has grown. When problems arise, from floods to baby formula shortages, people look to government to step up and offer quick fixes. The most important problems, however, require multiple actors in a host of organizations, in both the public and private sectors, offering a wide range of input and resources, all rowing in the same direction. Most agencies weren't organized for the reality of this new world of blended government. The costs of falling short of the new realities. The two of us have been in the business of improving government, both monitoring reform strategies and trying to nudge policymakers in the right direction, for longer than we're comfortable admitting. Between us, we have more than 75 years of experience in the world of public management, with more than 30 published books. We've witnessed a cascade of reforms that have sought to grow, shrink, devolve, privatize, and rewire government, all aimed at making the public sector more effective and efficient. But things feel worse off. Despite real improvements over the decades, many administrative systems are still antiquated, siloed, and opaque. The public has even less faith in government's abilities and responsiveness. It certainly isn't for a lack of trying or for a lack of good intentions. Every one of the last half-century's reforms made a good deal of sense. Every administration has succeeded in fixing some problems. The Nixon administration's new federalism agenda pressed for a substantial devolution of federal power and money to state and local governments. Its general revenue-sharing program distributed discretionary cash to local governments, while block grant programs gave lower-level policymakers flexibility in spending on programs ranging from job training to community development. The block grants gradually became encrusted with more regulations during the 1980s, until general revenue sharing finally ended in 1986. During the 1980s, the Reagan administration made a major push to transfer government functions to the private sector, either by devolving responsibility or contracting for programs. Business leader J. Peter Grace led a presidential commission to propose programs for elimination or privatization, and the administration privatized and contracted out a wide range of functions, from building security to cafeteria services. But no subsequent administration picked up the mantle. In 1992, David Osborne and Ted Gabler wrote Reinventing Government, which laid out a 10-point strategy for creating a government that works better and costs less. Arguing that bad systems stymie the work of good people, the authors suggested ways to streamline systems and free managers to use their judgment and experience. Vice President Al Gore used the book to map out the Clinton administration's reform plan, which recommended eliminating 16,000 pages of regulations and cutting $28 billion a year in regulatory burden. Gore aimed to boost trust in government by raising the National Performance Review's profile. He went so far as to smash an ashtray on Late Night with David Letterman as an example of well-meaning but onerous regulations. In this case, rules mandating that government-purchased ashtrays be nearly indestructible. The effort achieved significant improvements, especially by strengthening innovation in federal agencies, but the next administration did not vigorously pursue it. Beginning with the George W. Bush administration, each White House has announced an agenda to set its priorities for management reforms. The Bush administration's prime focus was on setting strategic goals and measuring results. The Obama administration created cross-agency priority goals and pressed federal agencies to set the targets by which they would be assessed. In the Trump administration, officials focused on IT modernization, data accountability and transparency, and human capital improvement. The Biden team turned to strengthening the federal workforce, improving customer experience, and bolstering processes. Presidents, of course, set their own agendas, hence the regular shift in focus. Framing a clear message and motivating career employees to pursue each new program is a major challenge. In 2016, the Obama administration created the Evidence-Based Policymaking Commission, whose report the following year made a powerful case for improving the use of analysis and evidence in policy decisions. In 2018, Congress followed up by legislating many of the Commission's recommendations in the Foundations for Evidence-Based Policymaking Act. Management reforms constantly promise better government, but over time, deficits in trust and performance have grown. These management reforms have contained good ideas, but something important was missing: a strategy for governance in the 21st century. Unlocking Solutions for a Complex World. We wrote this book to help people expand their vision of how government can solve today's problems and, importantly, how it can bridge gaps between agencies, between levels of government, between social service agencies and police departments, between public and private and non-profit organizations, and even between nations. The key, we believe, is to create new strategies with bridge builders at the helm, who can transform governance from hierarchy to networks, from authority to collaboration, from process to mission, and from fuzzy responsibility to accountability for results. Most important, we bring genuine hope and optimism for a new public sector approach to strengthen the very foundation of democratic governance by improving government's outcomes and restoring public trust. We've identified 10 keys to unlock the solutions. 1. Knock down barriers, because siloed thinking hinders success. 2. Seek mutual advantage, because shared governance builds on mutual pursuit of shared strategies. 3. Nurture private partners, because effective accountability requires instilling a public spirit into private operations. 4. Build trustworthy networks, because improving trust in government depends on excellence in cross-sector collaboration. 5. Grow catalytic government, because government often doesn't so much manage or deliver solutions as it shapes and integrates them. 6. Focus on outcomes, because internal procedures can't dominate the search for multi-sector success. 7. Make data the language, because data creates not only information, but the shared grammar for acting on it. 8. Redefine accountability, because we need new systems to replace traditional top-down authority. 9. Cultivate cross-boundary leaders, because all partners in the governance process have a responsibility to lead, jointly. 10. Make the exceptional routine, because the new era of public management requires scaling bridge building across government. In the chapters that follow, we'll explore these bridge-building steps, beginning with how to break down rigid silos, a step that's essential to making blended government a reality. Government's challenges, we've noted, are large and growing, but we are optimistic that these 10 steps can make government far more effective, both in improving government's performance and restoring citizens' trust. We wrote this book with a range of listeners in mind. For government managers who face the challenge of leading collaborative partnerships, the chapters contain tips for making bridge building work. For government's private and nonprofit partners, the book lays out the context of their work and how it connects with the quest for the public interest. Scholars, we believe, will find the book's fresh approach useful in expanding the role of existing public management theory. That, in turn, will make the book useful for students who seek to learn that theory and who want to become successful leaders in public service. Finally, citizens who want to understand how government really works and how policymakers can best improve it will surely be intrigued by the stories of effective government in action. Indeed, that is this book's true theme. Some existing models of management may be out of date, but a future based on a fresh approach to bridge building is positive and hopeful. Each chapter builds on the successful efforts of agile, energetic leaders who focus squarely on the problem they're trying to solve and who demonstrate how to get the job done. Each of the steps has been tried and proven by skilled leaders somewhere. We propose a plan for bringing these proven steps together into a concerted strategy for the century's biggest problems, and for its routine operations as well. That takes us to the first step, knocking down the barriers that too often get in the way of effective and responsive governance, and replacing those boundaries with the leadership steps that bring results. Chapter 1. Knock down barriers. A siloed perspective guarantees failure. Chapter Guide. Learning to solve the right problems. The bridge building imperative. Blended government, the new reality. The art of bridge building. Toward a new generation of bridge builders. 10 ways bridge builders can knock down barriers. As the government's response to Hurricane Katrina's 2005 battering of the Louisiana coast struggled to get rolling, it quickly became clear that the effort needed stronger leadership. CNN's Anderson Cooper walked New Orleans' flooded streets in hip waders. Viewers knew that he was there, but the government was not. Images burned into the public consciousness. Families stuck on roofs of their flooded homes, others trying to escape the city, only to be met by police determined to stop them, and thousands trapped inside the Superdome while water cascaded from the ceiling. On Labor Day, a week after Katrina hit New Orleans, Homeland Security Secretary Michael Chertoff called the Chief of Staff of the Coast Guard, Admiral Thad Allen, and asked him to go to New Orleans to take over the struggling federal effort as the principal federal official in charge of the response. Learning to solve the right problems. Allen sized up the situation and quickly concluded that everyone, had been trying to solve the wrong problem for a week. Early federal, state, and local responses in Louisiana were clearly chaotic, uncoordinated, and inadequate. The challenge, Allen said, was to create structures that supported local leaders without assuming their authorities. Allen needed a coalition of the willing, or at least one without opponents. Allen might have been in charge of the federal response, but he had no legal authority over state and local resources. He recognized immediately that the lack of coordination would cripple the ongoing response. Instead of seeking to give orders, he focused instead on building credibility and trust. In particular, Allen listened to local officials as they explained their struggles and their needs. He saw his job simply to collectively create an art of the possible where none previously existed. The important lesson from Katrina, he said later, is that no complex problem, be it a natural or man-made disaster, pandemic, or cyber attack, can be addressed by a single entity, individual, agency, or company. Effective outcomes are co-produced based on trust, a clear objective, and unity of effort. Thad Allen, the bridge builder. In a crisis, Allen said, you have to lead from everywhere. Leaders have to understand the problem and define it for everyone. They have to clearly communicate the outcomes everyone seeks and establish the values that will guide their work. And that's what Allen did in the first hours after he arrived in Louisiana. He asked his military aide to locate a place where thousands of responders could meet. She found a Dillard's department store warehouse in Baton Rouge where 2,000 people could squeeze in. Allen continued, I got up on a desk with a loudspeaker and told everybody that I was giving one order. They were to treat anybody they came into contact with who had been affected by the storm like a member of their own family. Their mother, father, brother, sister, whatever. And I said, if you do that, two things are going to happen. Number one, if you make a mistake, you're going to err on the side of doing too much, and that's okay. Number two, if somebody has a problem with what you've done, their problem's not with you. Their problem's with me. When he said that, the team erupted in a cheer. For days, they had been pilloried for poor performance, despite their best efforts. With Allen as bridge builder, they turned the corner. Just a simple set of core values, a North Star to steer by, was, I think, what they were looking for. And this was the moment when the struggling cleanup effort made a dramatic turn toward solving the problems at hand. Allen found a way to lead in a system with lots of players, but no one fully in charge. Finding those who had the resources to solve a particular problem, regardless of what kind of organization they might be in, and then weaving them together in a seamless, coordinated response. That was the core of bridge building. And, as we'll note in this book, that is the key to leaping over the silos that too often handcuff leaders in solving society's biggest problems. Dealing with Katrina and its aftermath was one of the toughest emergency response efforts in the nation's history. It required pulling together a collection of state agencies across the Gulf, local governments, nonprofit agencies like the Red Cross, and private organizations ranging from Walmart to banks and gas stations. Allen's leadership was truly remarkable. Instead of viewing the cleanup effort as a problem of how to manage a particular agency, he worked very hard to manage the problem and to pull in the resources needed from all the agencies and organizations involved, wherever they were located. Managing the problem and leading a whole-of-society response was what made Allen a bridge builder success. FEMA's reforms. It takes a whole team. In the years after Katrina, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, undertook sweeping reforms. In 2009, Craig Fugate became the FEMA administrator and focused the agency's strategy on a horizontal, whole-community approach, with FEMA seeking to assemble a broad coalition of resources, including federal, state, and local, as well as nonprofit, like the Red Cross, and for-profit, like big box stores, into a coordinated response to disasters. From his background as both a firefighter and director of emergency management in Florida, Fugate developed new partnerships with state and local governments. He famously developed the Waffle House Index to gauge the severity of local conditions after a storm. FEMA often found it difficult to size up the impact of a disaster. Throughout the South, the Waffle House chain of restaurants prided itself on remaining open 24 hours a day. If a restaurant closed, it was the sign of serious damage in the area. Fugate tracked which Waffle Houses were open, and that provided a quick and clear picture of local conditions following a storm. Fugate also nurtured the agency's budding relationships with private companies, building on the lessons learned from Katrina. In the first days after the hurricane struck, Walmart managed to get more than half of its damaged stores open again. For parents who needed diapers, families desperate for water, and everyone looking for ice to preserve food, Walmart provided help. The key to Walmart's success was its expertise in supply chain management, and its decision in the aftermath of the storm to give frontline managers support to do what they thought was best. In one store that had suffered severe damage, the assistant manager drove a bulldozer through the store, scooped up what could be salvaged, and distributed it to residents in the parking lot. She broke into the pharmacy in her own store to find the drugs that a nearby hospital desperately needed. FEMA turned to Walmart for important lessons on how to get essential supplies to people following disasters. Home Depot also learned from the storm. When a major storm threatens, the company pre-positions supplies and preloads trucks to get additional items quickly to hard-hit places. Home Depot created its own Emergency Operations Center to coordinate its response and to work closely with FEMA. Emergency response as bridge building. The first days after Katrina sent searing images into Americans' homes. But the storm taught an important lesson. Success in responding to disasters means moving from a command and control approach to a network-building approach. FEMA reorganized its operations and developed a far more effective response system, with a big push to leverage the networks of responders with the capacity to help communities respond to crises. It paid off when the nation broke its previous record of 81 disasters in 2010, only to set a new record with 87 disasters the next year. An essential part of FEMA's new approach was building closer partnerships with its emergency management colleagues in state and local governments, as well as with key private sector partners. The big box stores, which had mastered supply chain logistics, not only taught the federal government how to respond better to disasters, they themselves became a crucial element in the emergency response team. Fugate proved the value of the new strategy in 2012, when Hurricane Sandy dealt a devastating blow to the shores of New Jersey and New York. It was a new FEMA that responded. Fugate called himself the most impatient person in the world and launched a far more agile response, much better coordinated with state and local governments as well as with the private sector. Part of the strategy was pre-positioning supplies so the agency could respond better. Some experts criticized that effort as wasteful, but Fugate responded, "Better to be fast than to be late." The new partnerships with the private retailers paid off as well. From experience with past storms, Walmart knew to stock up on the staples people would most need: Pop-Tarts, especially strawberry, muffins, and pizza. Sam's Club shipped 7,000 generators to its stores in the Northeast, and employees came from as far away as Pittsburgh to make sure the stores could serve the customers. Home Depot and Lowe's stocked up on chainsaws and sump pumps. Fugate had invested a great deal of effort in building strong partnerships with the big box stores to help them provide the aid citizens needed to focus FEMA's efforts where the stores weren't available, and to learn from the best logistics experts they could find. Within FEMA, Fugate created lightning bolt drills where he would create an artificial disaster and have the agency's employees respond. It all paid off in the aftermath of Sandy. Speaking of Fugate's instincts, a FEMA official said he is very down-to-earth, and that always helped him out a lot. He had this, "Okay, that's a problem, let's address it and move on forward" way about him. He doesn't get caught up in the weeds. It turned out that disaster victims didn't really care where the help came from as long as it came. That was the core of Fugate's approach as a bridge builder. There's no way government can solve the challenges of a disaster with a government-centric approach. It takes the whole team. The bridge-building imperative. Understanding the critical role of bridge-building begins with the singular proposition that Thad Allen and Craig Fugate.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?